and another poem which has a theme of clocks and grandmothers, though this time in a different context. In December 2009, I was commissioned to write a poem for World AIDS Day, and I wrote this poem, which is based in South Africa, and in South Africa the isiZulu word for grandmother is gogo, and there are many grandmothers who are looking after their grandchildren because the child's parents have died through HIV/AIDS, but are also having to give regular medication to these children because they're also HIV positive. So this is a poem for those grandmothers. Gogo's clock. Her clock has numbers big enough to see in the dim glow of the oil lamp. It is almost 6 p.m. The child of her child is drumming a spoon on a cooking pot. This is not the old age she imagined, stiff limbs reaching to her highest shelf for medicines that masquerade as syrup, sweet as cherry bubble gum, or leave a bitter aftertaste like 10-cent coins. Days are gripped in rigorous routines of twice daily dosage to stop the multiplying virus in its tracks. She holds each syringe up close to failing eyes, peers at millimeter markings, waits for the clock and the jingle of a twilight TV soap to verify the time for coaxing chemicals inside the child. Mealie meal and sugar beans, then sleep, curled like petals round their common loss until the morning breaks. The clock says 5:30, time enough to rouse and stretch her tired body, organise the morning medication, put the mealie porridge on to boil and step outside. A chill in the air, winter on its way, and with it the rains. She has kept this seedling child of hers alive for 1 full year. How to keep her warm and dry. Okay, doing okay for time. Okay, I'm going to move on and do some, maybe 2 or 3 other ones, if there's time. My father comes from Sri Lanka originally. My mother is English, and one of the things that's been very important to me, and is part of kind of what's behind particularly this collection, is a pride in all of my histories, in all of my roots, and an interest and a pride in finding out what's happened. And I think this first poem fits in with the theme of hard times because it goes back to the 1800s and the hard times that my ancestors in Yorkshire had working in the flax mills. So this is a poem called A Wider View, and there are some references to places in the town where I was born, Leeds, but I think it will bear translation. It's okay. A wider view. From the backyard of his back-to-back, my great-great-granddad searched for spaces in the smoke-filled sky to stack his dreams, high enough above the cholera to keep them and his newborn safe from harm. In 1869, eyes dry with dust from 12 hours combing flax beneath the conicals of light in Marshall's Temple Mill, he took the long way home because he craved the comfort of a wider view. As he passed the panelled gates of Tower Works, the tall octagonal crown of Harding's chimney drew his sights beyond the limits of his working life, drowned the din of engines, looms and shuttles with imagined peals of ringing bells. Today, My footsteps echo in the sodium gloom of Neville Street's dark arches, and the red brick vaults begin to moan as time, collapsing in the river air, sweeps me out to meet him on the wharf. We stand now, timeless, in the flux of time, anchored only by the axis of our gaze, a ventilation shaft with gilded tiles and Giotto's geometric lines, while the curve of past and future generations arcs between us. And this is one for Sri Lanka. In 1992, when everybody was celebrating the exploits of Christopher Columbus, I decided to do a little research into the so-called discovery of my father's place of birth, which was then known as Ceylon. And this is and I did it through looking at the cinnamon plant, and this is called cinnamon roots. Cinnamon, sweet wood spice, once traded like gold. When I look for my roots, I find you, yellowish brown like my winter skin, native of Sri Lanka, growing wild in the jungles of the Kandy Highlands. 1492, Columbus never finds you. Sailing westwards to the lands of the Arawak Indians, he promises spices and gold, trophies for a Spanish queen, brings her Taino slaves as gifts. But Portugal travels east to an island that falls like a teardrop from the tip of India, finds your soft sweetness, wraps it in hard cash, grows rich on your rarity, founding a spice trade that deals in blood. The Dutch make plantations to tame your wild fragrance that can never sweeten their breath, demand quotas of your bark enforced by death and torture, burn down your August harvest, fabled fuel of the Phoenix fire, to keep up the prices. Dutch East India becomes British East India. Your acres grow in the rain and heat of Sri Lanka, filling the coffers of the British Empire. 1992. I buy your ground aroma in pre-packed jars, fry you with aubergine and coriander, look for my roots, find you, yellowish brown like my winter skin, native of Sri Lanka, growing wild in the jungles of the Kandy Highlands. Okay. There are two poems I want to read if I have the time. I'm just looking at somebody to see if, yeah, I do. In particular, because they're about places, and at the moment I'm into places and travelling, and I think I might have got that from my Ceylonese grandfather who travelled to England in the 1920s, which was quite an amazing thing to do, and that's part of the reason why I ended up existing, I guess. So I'm very, and he was also, by the way, as well as being an advocate, a lawyer, was also a poet, so I'm following in his footsteps. So I like to travel to places, and these two poems are about two places in the world. The first one is about Paris, and it comes out of a story I heard of a long time ago in the 1800s. A young woman was fished out of the River Seine, and nobody knew who she was. And she's quite famously known now as l'inconnue de la Seine, the unknown of the Seine. And I wrote this poem in her voice. L'inconnue de la Seine. There was a swell on the surface of the Seine that day, making faces at me. So I blew kisses at an open mouth and whispered, "Drown me peaceful, drown me slow." I wanted the time, you see, to float, undead, through Paris. I could have choked on a glass of milk as a child and missed this opportunity. Don't call it suicide as if it's a tragedy. This was the first time in my life I had been in control of anything. Imagine, not dying, but dissolving, becoming a river. Was I afraid? Not of the fall. I was afraid of the water police. The way they walk along the river, any one of them could have seen me floating. But nightfall saved me. Before the river had me, I had one last look at the stars. Just look at you, I said, already dead and still shining. And this next one is about New York, so I thought I'd come a bit closer to home. Autumn in New York. The waitress in a diner on Fifth Avenue knows all there is to know about fast love. She's had enough of tourists gawping at the skyscrapers who only want to eat pastrami on rye because they're in Manhattan and feel like it's a movie. All the yellow taxicabs and NYPD hanging on street corners. She's leaning on the bar, polishing a tired dream of buying oysters in a Paris market, touching fingers with a French lover who promises une nuit d'amour. And she's thinking how it will be such slow love and like an opera full of endless recitatives. It feels fitting to end the whole reading talking about love, because really I'm reminded of Pablo Neruda, who says, if we could only placate the world's rage with a drop of poetry or of love. So it feels fitting to end the reading talking about love, because after all, that is why war is so horrific, because it is so much the opposite of love. So that's where I'll end. Thank you.